Okay, we'll give you all a minute to link on. Please do start joining us. We'll begin momentarily for another episode of Never Again live broadcast with Mayor Halevi Weinstein and some special guests. We'll give you another couple of minutes to get your computers on or your cell phones on we can be found on our Facebook page, israelnow.ca, as well as on YouTube, on Facebook, and now on Twitter as well. So let's introduce today's show. And again, anybody's watching now, if your friends and colleagues and peers can't watch it now, they can watch the replay on YouTube or on our Facebook page at israelnow.ca. Just a little recap for you just joining us. Just a few days ago, we had a show where we basically discussed the descent and ascent to the Temple Mount of Idmar Ben-Gvir, which was met with international condemnation. Wasn't a surprise, never is. Once again, the double standard internationally is always aggravating. When Hamas, an internationally designated terrorist organization, desecrates the Temple Mount with rocks, rallies, raucous riots, the whole world is silent. Yet when Idmar Ben-Gvir decides to take a leisurely stroll upon the Temple Mount, the outraged world gasps in horror. So today's show is an extension of that, how the United Nations and the entire Arab League work closely hand in hand with their aim to destroy the state of Israel. It's nothing new, it's nothing surprising, but somehow the world just does not see this, that the Arab plan is to drive the Jewish state into extinction. So if you look at the recent vote in the United Nations regarding investigating Israel's occupation, which is not an occupation, especially our land. I don't know, when I was growing up, my parents talked about occupation of Jews. They were talking about doctors and lawyers and accountants. I didn't even understand this whole new occupation concept. And who voted in favor? All of our friends, Egypt and Jordan, who have peace treaties with Israel, and of course, every member of the Abraham Accords voted against Israel. Didn't abstain, didn't vote in favor, but they continued to vote against. We have special guests joining us tonight who will discuss these topics, including Liz Burney from the ZOA, National Director of Research and Special Projects. We have Barry Shaw, International Public Diplomacy Director at the Institute for Strategic Studies. And back with us again, almost a regular, is Meir Jalowitz, past National Director of both the ZOA and the Jewish Defense League. Mayor, take it away.
Well, good to join everyone today. We have a full show. It's going to be very important what we're going to be discussing, and I'm hoping that everyone who's joining us could share this, share the link on your various social media platforms that you use, be it Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever the platform you use. Email us. We'd appreciate it. We'll reach a lot more people. This is the first show that we're finally live streaming through Twitter as well. And ever since Elon Musk has taken over, has purchased Twitter, we've been able to reach a lot more people, thousands more people. And that's the way it should be. Facebook has been attacking us and have their mandate. It's not good. Same with Instagram, but we're good on Twitter. We're good with our email list. And also, this show is also being broadcast, by the way, from our website, israelnow.ca. So you could always go there as well to watch it simultaneously being broadcast live. There's a lot going on. Let me just start, actually. It's interesting, the parsha that we just read in shul, synagogues throughout the world, dealt with Yaakov is on his bed, and he gives blessings to his sons. They're all around the bed as he's dying. And then he dies, and his wish was to be buried in Israel, in Hebron. So he was buried in Hebron. There was a whole funeral procession going to Israel, to Hebron. And then after the burial, Yosef and his brothers, the brothers were very concerned, because after all, they got rid of Yosef, and they sold him as a slave, and they treated him horribly. So they thought that since their father Yaakov died, that Yosef may seek his revenge. So they made an appeal to Yosef, and Yosef cried about it. And the question is always asked, how come Yosef had such a reaction? He cried when the brothers, they were so concerned that, they're thinking this for so many years, the years that they were in Egypt. So why did Yosef cry? Yosef cried because it's what I heard from the rabbi in shul, and it's really on topic for today. Yosef was the interpreter of dreams. Yosef was the idealist. In fact, we have a concept, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef. That's how revered he is. Yosef made it to the second most powerful person in Egypt. He saved the economy, the famine. And like I said, he was the idealist. He was a believer in God. He just saw the future, how the situation should be, and how it should be for the Jewish people, and how God's plan is. As he even to his brothers when he encountered them, first revealing himself to them that I'm your brother. So he cried because he saw they didn't get it. They're stuck still in the mundane. They're similar to what we have with Israel. Israel has a policy of managing the conflict. Kick the soccer ball down the field, we'll deal with it later. In spite of all the challenges that are in front of us, in spite of all the hate, it's very vivid to us. Let's not deal with it. Let's just try and compartmentalize everything and leave it for another day, another day, another day. As Gary said in the introduction, the UN vote against Israel, the attack against Israel, Jordon, who Israel has a peace treaty with, also the Arab countries, the Islamic countries that are part of the Abraham Accord, that signed those deals with Israel, normalization agreements with Israel. Life is great. Let's go back and forth to the UAE, to Bahrain, and let's go there. Let's maybe open up a Chabad house there, a kosher restaurant there. Let's have all kinds of simchas. Meanwhile, they take Israel before the Security Council of the UN. So let's not have any blinders, and let's see what the ideal is. Jordon, in fact, just hours ago, they issued a new currency bill. They call it a dinar. On the dinar, there's a picture of the King of Jordan and a picture of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, we put out a statement. We're hoping, that the Israeli government should modify the shekel and put on the shekel a picture of the Beis Hamikdash, the Jewish temple. Why are we hiding for everything? Also, what we're going to be discussing, Jordan, who we have a peace deal with, in our parliament, members of the parliament, MPs, not one, many. Many MPs were espousing the worst Jew hatred. They're saying the Jews are descendants of apes and pigs. They're calling for an intifada. They're calling on all Jordanians to attack Israel, to kill Jews. This is who we have a peace deal with. So the leadership in Israel, the government in Israel, that's the dinar, in fact, on our screen. There's the Al-Aqsa Mosque. He owns Jerusalem. That's what the message is from Jordan, from their new currency. With these members of parliament from Jordan, there was no sanction from the King of Jordan against them. There was not one apology. There was no action taken. This is intolerable. The government of Israel should appeal and demand from the UN Security Council that measures are taken against Jordan for this, and that those members of parliament are sanctioned and expelled from the Jordanian parliament, at least for the record. This has to be said. We can't just go on to get along and continuously kick the soccer ball down the field and make believe that it will just go away. It's not going away. They're very proud of these statements. And again, this is incitement against the Jewish people. We have wonderful guests with us today who are going to join us. Now, we have Mayor Jolowitz. Mayor Jolowitz has a long history of being very active with the Jewish community. As Gary said, he was with the Zionist Organization of America as a director or chairman, and he was also chairman of the Jewish Defense League a number of years ago as well, and with other Jewish organizations as well. Liz Bernie, who's an attorney, is with the ZOA also, and she's issued recent statements about the status quo, in so-called status quo with the Temple Mount. We're going to be discussing that. We have Barry Shaw, who's with us as well. He's an expert in strategic studies in Israel on security matters. So we're going to give everyone first 2 minutes to make opening statements on the issues that we're talking about. And by the way, we're not just talking about the outrage at the UN and the so-called status quo with regards to Har Habayit, the Temple Mount, but we're also talking about perfidy within the Jewish community. Yair Lapid is planning to make a trip to the United States to rally up members of the Jewish community to turn against the government in Israel. You believe this? I don't recall any prime minister ever in Israel that has done that to try and rally up Jews in the United States. And who's he going to rally up? J Street? He's going to link with Jewish groups in the United States that have rejected the IHRA definition of Antisemitism. That's outrageous. That's completely outrageous. So we're going to be talking about the issue of perfidy. And by the way, his father, Tommy Lapid, was good friends with Rudolf Kastner. And Rudolf Kastner, there was a book written about him called Perfidy, written by Ben Hecht. And Rudolf Kastner, we'll get into the story, but selecting a certain group of Jews who could be rescued from the Holocaust and turning a blind eye to the masses of Hungarian Jews and giving them a lullaby story that, no, you're going to a pretty good place, but they're going to the death camps. Yair Lapid, the son of Tommy Lapid, what's his end game? Is he enamored with Rudolf Kastner? We've got to make these decisions. After all, no, we don't. And if Rudolf Kastner would have been honest with the Jews of Hungary, many Jews would have fought against the Nazis and would not enter those trains and go to the death camps like they did. So there was a book by Ben Hecht called Perfidy, and we're going to be discussing that as well. Let's first bring on Mayor Jolowitz. Mayor, you got, how are you? And you have 2 minutes right now to make your opening remarks.
So we're actually going to do this by 2 minutes. I'm going to actually set a clock, Mayor Jolowitz, and when you got about 15 seconds left, I'll give you a little notice. And we're going to try to keep this with a format. We've never done this before. It's not in my nature, but we're going to give it a try. So, Mayor, you got 2 minutes. Take it away.
Without the use of adjectives or adverbs in order to make this go faster. But I'll give it a try. Israel, as we know, is over 3,000 years old. It's been said by others and posters, perhaps, that it's 75 years young. And it's remarkable that for the 75 years that Israel existed as a modern state, Israel has been in a state of war. And as I mentioned when I appeared a few days ago with you guys, it's a different type of war. It's a war of ideas. And it's a war that I suggested we're losing. Now, for the 75 years that Israel existed, for the first half of that 75 years, Israel would engage in conventional wars. Conventional wars are wars that are fought with tanks, with jets, and with troops on the ground. The last time that Israel was engaged in a conventional war, a war that it won, was probably 1982. 1982. In 2006, when Israel went into the Second Lebanese War, it's not a war that they won. And when one looks at the engagements into Gaza in 2008-9, 2012, 2014, and again in 2021, those were operations. They were not, in the conventional sense, a war. Israel is now playing the game that's been dictated by its enemies, and that war is now defined by a different type of army. It's diplomacy. And Israel has, in order to demonstrate to the world that it wants a peaceful solution to the conflict in the Middle East, has engaged in a diplomatic war. And as I said, it's a war of words, and it's a war that we are losing. And more of that later.
Thanks. That was great. 2 minutes. Liz, we're going to bring you on. You get the same 2 minutes. Take it away.
All right. Great. This week, Zionist organization, it's not just the Jordanian parliament that Meyer was discussing. It's Jordanian Jews actually threatened intifada. He said in an interview on conflict, he's intifada, which is a threat of another intifada status, and he's prepared for kinds. This is really a threat against Israel at the UN, and what the Jordanian parliament did violate the Israel-Jordan signed by Jordan's King Hussein and his father, which guarantees the Temple Mount. It's a peace treaty which provides places of historical and middle of the provision. It says each party has access to places of religious historical significance, and of course freedom to pray there. For David Freeman also tweeted about this this week, and the Israel-Jordan Peace Treaty of 1994 ensure access of all faiths to rights, including the Temple Mount, only affording worshippers of the Muslim faith worship there, and Jews are not representing the Temple Mount under the treaty or under quo, murky as it is, and they go on many occasions no threat this reality. In other words, Ben Gvir strolled on the Temple Mount, any sort of status quo rights of the Jordanian Israel international other international law, and the severed protection of holy places laws, free access to holy places. I don't know where I am, and then I would like to quote what Menachem. Do you have a minute for that?
Yeah, you got another 10 seconds. Ty, wrap it up, but keep going.
And it'll take a little longer than 10 seconds. Meyer Soloveichik actually quoted this in People's Freedom of Religion to be Respected. He did so. He quoted Prime Minister Begin, who said, "What our ancestors, ancient oppressors, even at the cost tolerated by the generation of Jews that describe oppression and the first of redemption, a people that its holy places, that does not even treat, however much it may babble about the most holy spot in their country, and their mumbled underfoot are slaves in spirit." We have to make sure that we will mount. This is supposed to be, according to laws, for all people. All people should have the.
Okay. Thank you, Liz Bernie. Thank you, Mayor Jolwitz. I don't see Barry Shaw joining us yet. We sent him the link before, so hopefully he'll join us shortly. I'm just wondering if we could familiarize everyone with what we're talking about when it comes to Jordan. We do have the video. It's a very short video on what happened in the Jordanian parliament. It should be shown. It's about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. If our doctor in the studio could key up that video, that will be pertinent to our discussion. It's also important for people to know that the Jewish aspiration, with regards to the Temple Mount, the real Jewish aspiration is the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash, the Jewish temple. And there are specific laws pertaining to the Jewish temple. And yes, we do have an area there for the nations of the world to come and worship. We certainly do. But it's not free for all for anyone, and certainly not for us either. There are laws. Here's the video for what happened in Jordan.
ونذكرك يا جبان يا خنزير بأن للأردن حدود مع فلسطين تزيد عن 300 كيلومتر، وهي قنبلة موقوتة ستنفجر بوقتك وبوجهك وبأمثالك يا جبان.
يجب أن نقف موقف جاد وصلب خلف جلالة الملك حتى نشعرهم لا بل نرهبهم، وهم وكما يعلم الجميع بأن اليهود من أجبن شعوب العالم. مجرد ما مثل ما حكينا سابقا خربشة على النهر الكل بيلجأوا إلى حصونهم. هذا موضوع خط أحمر، نفتدي القدس والمقدسات بالمهج والأرواح ونبذل الغالي والنفيس، ومستعدين لأن نكون شهداء ومشاريع شهداء، وأول من يستخدم العصا والقنبلة والبندقية تجاه هذا الكيان المغتصب.
والجميع الأردنيين يتحولوا إلى فدائيين واستشهاديين من أجل فلسطين ومن أجل الأقصى. أبناء القردة والخنازير يجب أن يعلموا بأن الرد من الشعب الأردني والفلسطيني الآن ربما يسمع كلام، ولكن هذا الكلام يعبر عن بركان قادم، لأن الرد سيكون بالرصاص قريبا بإذن الله.
إن أرادوا أن يحولوها إلى حرب دينية ستكون نهايتهم بإذن الله. هذه أول نقطة. النقطة الثانية، لي عتب شديد على أبو حسين مع انفعاله الشديد. المرأة هي التي تتصدى الآن، المرأة هي التي تقود الثورات وترفع مشعل الحرية بكل أنحاء العالم، والأم التي تربي أبنائها من أجل الجهاد هي المرأة القوية، وليس هذا الفأر يشبه بالنساء. هذا فأر ولا يشبه بأي امرأة موجودة على وجه سطح الكرة الأرضية.
والتاريخ خير شاهد على هزائم اليهود. وبحب أحكي لكل يهودي موجود بفلسطين إنه الأيام دول، وعندنا هون في ولادات بتولد، وراح يجي يوم نقتحم فيه تل أبيب، وهذا وعد من الله.
إلا ندعم موقف جلالة الملك ونقف خلفه داعمين ومؤيدين حتى ينطق الحجر يا مسلم هذا يهودي تعال فاقتله، وهم يعانون في الليل والنهار من هذا الكلام.
Mayor John, let's go first.
Saturday Night Live. The remarkable thing is, with all these threats that these people throw towards Israel, the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan would not exist the way that it does today. King Abdullah would not be king today if it wasn't for the protection of the Israeli intelligence and Israeli security services. To suggest that the Jordanians are threatening Israel in any military manner is truly laughable. Not to be ignored. Don't misunderstand. Not to be ignored. But it's truly laughable. There was a situation when during the Gulf War, when Scuds were falling in Israel, and in order for Israel to retaliate, it became necessary for Israel to have to fly over Jordan. At least it was understood for anyone who looked at a map. And the Jordanians suggested that if Israel flies its Air Force over Jordan, that the Jordanians will have to destroy the Israeli Air Force. At the time, Israel's head of the IAF, Avihu Ben Nun, came out with a statement that he made, which was criticized because it was a political comment, and military people in Israel aren't permitted while in uniform, and a year after, to make any military statements, or political statements, I should say. And the comment that he made was that if the Jordanian Air Force tried to engage ours, there would not be a Jordanian Air Force in 9 minutes. In 9 minutes. So for us to see these people, these savages, when the Jews were civilizing the world, these were people who were still the uncivilized. And for them to suggest the Jews, sons of apes and monkeys, apes and pigs, are the threat and everything else. If nothing else, it just tells us that we need to wake up and understand that these people who we have normalization agreements with, and in the case of Jordan in 1994, it was actually a peace treaty, it's farcical. The reason that they exist, as I said when I began, was simply because of Israel. And Israel should actually pull in and say, you know, there will be a state of Palestine. That state of Palestine is going to be where it belongs, Jordan. It's going to be in Jordan. And if you don't somehow bridle the mouthpieces that speak in the parliament right now, till it's the King Abdullah, then it'll be somebody else rather than you sitting on that throne. It's absolutely not acceptable. And yet what we do, we, supporters of Israel, and certainly the Israeli government, is we bend over backward, petitioning the world to have us believe, or have them believe, I should say, that Israel has a peace partner, and one of the people that Israel is in a state of peace with is Jordan. And it's time for us to call a spade a spade. Enough of this nonsense. We are our worst enemy, and I would be remiss if I didn't, because I do this on every show, quote Pogo, the cartoon opossum from 1953, and again 1970, in which he said, I knew it, we have met the enemy and he is us. That the Jordanians say what they say isn't a surprise to anyone. That we react to it the way that we react to it, in a tepid, feeble manner, that is inacceptable.
Absolutely. Liz, join us. Join the discussion.
Sir, April, Abdullah, real which is to have complete and which are demonstrate how despicable their condition to they have wanted the right to restrict or prevent non-Muslim visits and Muslims to apply to now this harkens back to the Ottomans instead. The Ottomans controlled the area. For the first allow Jews to visit at all, but then they passed a law that allowed it in advance, and the way that was performed in practice was had to be somebody extremely prominent, and it was any Jews, ordinary Jews like to rights to visit. Jordon wants to harken back to. They wanted to forbid needed Israeli security. And that, of course, security have many instances when Palestinians rioted on the Mount Rocks. You remember the incident where they shot, throwing iron bars, murdering them in the Alaska Mosque, around the Alaska Mosque. That's on the Temple Mount, which shows a little respect that obviously you don't need police for that, to throw boulders down from the Temple Mount to the Kotel. Jordon also wants to ban non-Muslim prayer necessities, such as prayer books. They wanted to restrict non-Muslim more than 5 people, which of course would prevent a minyan to pray. They wanted to restore routes of no more than 150 made dress codes for non-Muslims. Part of the whole dhimmi, which existed since the Omar was the one who built the. I noticed that you had the Nazi Jewish star with the it's up in the left-hand corner, and that actually these badges and sashes originated with the which Jordon would like to impose. In addition, this is unbelievably outrageous. Wants to charge non-Muslims fired to pay Muslims to visit Judaism. Just these demands or Israel-Jordan peace treaty. This is intolerable, but this is one. I think it's important that we understand how outrageous.
I think there's another aspect that many people are not aware of also. Like the site of what they call the Al-Aqsa Mosque, or the Dome of the Rock. So they have a story. The narrative is such that Muhammad flew on some kind of horse to Jerusalem, to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and that's their story, how it became such a significant part of their faith. But here's the deal. Muhammad died before there was an Al-Aqsa Mosque. There was no Al-Aqsa Mosque. There was
any mosque.
No.
There was.
They're right.
There was a single mosque in Jerusalem.
Right.
There wasn't a single
right.
mosque
So.
In Jerusalem when
right, exactly. So this really what's going on here is this is so-called Palestinian nationalism at its core. They have made it into the centerpiece of their so-called identity. And that's an issue unto itself too. That's a topic unto itself too. But and they have invented a history, and everyone's going along with what they say because they get so upset, and they riot, and they have these groups, Jihad and Hamas, and you name it, all kinds of terrorist organizations. So I mean, if they're ready to go to battle for all this, then maybe there's truth to it. That's how people are buying this, but it couldn't be further from the truth. there is no basis to it. There's no foundation to the lie, and we continuously, the Jewish people collectively, and previous governments in Israel have collectively just managed the conflict, kicked the soccer ball down the field. We'll deal with it later, and there will be inertia, and so on and so forth. If there was a serious policy, for instance, in Israel, to wear the enemy down, and you could measure the results every year, 6 months, to see how much more have we worn them down to defeat. And that's one thing, but it's just, but if managing the conflict means it's just kicking the soccer ball down the field, we'll deal with, just ignore it, until many of us in our community don't even understand what the Jewish goal is, and what our aspirations are, and what we want, and what a Jewish state means, and you lose that attachment, which is what's going on in the United States, certainly in North America, or in all the diaspora, with assimilation and intermarriage and lack of identity and lack of attachment, then managing the conflict doesn't work. We need strong leadership, and hopefully this new government in Israel, one of the litmus tests will be, are there going to be Hamas rallies still going on Har Bayit? Is Itamar Ben-Gvir going to allow the Hamas flag to be raised on Har Bayit as police minister? I know he doesn't believe at all that should exist, but hopefully he could take matters and straighten out the situation. That's what we're hoping. Mayor, what's your thoughts on this?
Minutes before, when I mentioned the flyover that Israel was supposed to take in order to take out the Scuds. Well, the lesson that was not learned of that engagement yesteryear, almost 3 decades ago, was the fact that the United States quite strongly admonished Israel and told Israel, you will not strike against Iraq. We will prosecute the war for you. This is a Gulf War that they told Israel to stand down. Never before has Israel, in defense of its own existence, and in this particular case, one could argue that the Scuds were not an existential threat to Israel. But nonetheless, for the United States at the time to tell Israel to stand down and not to respond because they will take care of it, and for Israel to have complied, which they did, never mind the fact that we now know, looking back, that the Patriot missiles, the Patriot defense system which was used, was actually ineffective. It was ineffective. The reason that there was no damage done by the Scuds wasn't because of the Patriots. It was rather because they just fell in the wrong areas, or for us, the right areas, I guess one would say. But nonetheless, the lesson that should have been learned then was that Israel should have told the world, the United States as its so-called friend, that we will do what we need to do in order to take care of ourselves. But the lesson was lost. But it was not lost on the Arabs, who noticed that Western pressure against Israel is something which is a card that they could play, which is the reason that I began by saying that the war that is being fought today is a war of ideas. The tool that's being used, the vehicle to prosecute this war against Israel, is diplomacy. The Arabs, having realized after Israel's first half of its modern-day existence that they could not win a war conventional in nature, decided that they could win elsewhere, and that is on the peace front. And that's what they've done. The darkest day, I've mentioned this before on this podcast, the darkest day in Israel's history was September 13th, 1993. That was when Yitzhak Rabin offered his feeble hand, the handshake, as did Shimon Peres as well, and shook the hand of the mass murderer Yasser Arafat, and allowed the world to believe something which they themselves didn't believe before, and that is that Israel's adversary was a potential peace partner. And we all know what happened. The record is quite clear. The incidents of terrorism, because terrorism was supposed to come to an end, were magnified manyfold, and it hasn't stopped. And the Arabs realized then, as they realize today, and we saw it spoken just a week and 2 weeks ago, that anytime that they want something, when they need concessions from Israel, what they do is they turn and shout in the direction of the Western world that this will lead to violence. And unless the Western world somehow disciplines Israel, scolds Israel, controls Israel, that there will be violence. And the Western world, as stupid as it is, complies. It complies. I've often said, I've written quite a number of op-ed pieces in which I said there are two realities in the Middle East that we need to take into account as advocates and proponents of a strong Israel. The one is that the so-called experts aren't experts at all. And the other is that the so-called friends of Israel aren't friends at all.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask a question to Liz Burney. Liz, Yair Lapid made it public that he's intending to go to the United States to rally support from American Jews to fight against the government of Israel. You're with the ZOA, Zionist Organization of America. How does your organization respond to that?
Well, we haven't put out a statement on it yet, I believe, but it's something to do. But this did not. This even happened. This happened while was in office as Nachman Shai, the Minister of Diaspora Affairs, actually at a conference of presidents. I believe it was a conference of presidents, or could have been AZM. He basically said, "Well, I'm here to Israel." No, that's not the goal. That minister is supposed to be doing. An Israeli minister in his own country, to including Jews in the diaspora, some of the most hostile critics of Israel, and IF, and agitating against Israel. He reverses the role of what a minister is supposed to. It's obscene. Elaborate a little bit about what you said, Mohammed and his dream. This whole idea visited the Temple Mount and ascended to heaven from the temple. And it's hundreds of years after life, and it's based on a Quranic, which merely says that Muhammad had a travel dream of Damascus, which is the Kaaba, and Mecca mosque. Now, the furthest mosque, for a number of reasons, one in Jerusalem at the time, another one, relatively close city, and it was there, furthest mosque was someplace like that. Mosques in Jerusalem until about 60 years after, in 632 of the Common Era. Jerusalem was a relatively known city. There would have been no identify it. And as you mentioned, that the holiness of the Temple Mount to, but which is not true. And by Jews throughout the world have times a day facing Mount. If you're in Jerusalem, you face Muslims. They set up the mosque so that they're back the holiest part of the Temple Mount and Mecca, and they face Mecca, Jerusalem, and the Ospas relate to the Temple Mount, or Isaac was, and the angel appeared, and but in preparation for sacrifice. David brought the covenant of the ark, of course, and stood for approximately 1,000 years. He also attempted to build the third temple in 361. There was an effort when Justin, the nephew of, was the emperor, of the Byzantine Empire, his death, and he allowed, it's considered him an apostate. He was a pagan, and so he allowed the Jews to go, and then unfortunately he died 2 years later. Christians then destroyed the third temple, and then there was also had conquered one, I believe, or 614, and allowed Jews to started building a synagogue there, temple. Unfortunately, the Persians turned on the Jew side with the Christians, and so that was. There's always been this prayer and this effort to build our holy temple, and it's really the center and holiest part of Jerusalem.
Absolutely well put. Mayor, what kind of steps do you see that the government of Israel could take against Jordan? Like, would they try to, at least for the record, summon the UN Security Council, call on the U.S. government to take measures, call on Tony Blinken to do something? There's members of the U.S. government on their way to Israel, I think, this week to discuss the matters that they're apparently concerned about the Temple Mount. At a meeting that Netanyahu will have with them, if you were to give Prime Minister Netanyahu some advice, what would you say he says to the U.S. administration, who's on their way to meet with Netanyahu? I believe it's later this week.
Well, we've got to put things in proper perspective. Tony Blinken should be left alone to practice his electric guitar in his mother's basement. That's as accomplished as he'll ever be. There's a problem, and the problem is one that we're part of, and that is that we've allowed the others. And when I say others, I'm talking about Israel's enemies, I'm talking about Israel's adversaries, and I'm talking about Israel's so-called friends. We've allowed them to accept this redefinition of the conflict in the Middle East. When I started lecturing 50 years ago, it was the Arab-Israeli conflict, a value-free conflict, the Arab-Israeli conflict. And it should have more probably been called, as it should today, either the Arab war against Israel or the Muslim war against the Jews, if you were to include, for example, the Islamic Republic of Iran. The tragedy is that we've allowed them not only to subvert language, and language dictates the narrative, and the narrative directs the debate. What we've done is we've allowed them to redefine this conflict as Israeli-Palestinian. And in having accepted that nomenclature, we've lost. We have lost, and we will continue to lose as long as we believe that it's an Israeli-Palestinian. The Palestinians are a manufactured entity, manufactured not only in the Middle East, manufactured in the Kremlin in the 60s. And they came into being in order to negate the Zionist enterprise. And we've allowed that to happen because even in Israel, we see elements, and even though the left in Israel is certainly smaller than the right wing, the right has always been fragmented, and we see ours succumbing to this redefinition of the debate. You'd mentioned Yair Lapid. Yair Lapid is the third prime minister, ex-prime minister. I like that ex part. Who, if you look at Ehud Barak and Ehud Olmer, they actually make a living traveling to Western circles and giving lectures. Ehud Barak spoke here in Phoenix, Arizona, and was paid $55,000 to speak for 35 or 38 minutes, bashing Israel as part of a fundraiser, a pro-Israel thing, bashing Israel, bashing the Israeli government. Ehud Olmer does the same thing. These are the enemies of Israel, and we are so reluctant to call them that. And when Yair Lapid turns around and says that he will now petition the liberal American Jewish element, which we know is not pro-Israel the way that it pretends to be, then what we've done is we have refused to recognize that we are at fault. And politics continues to be played by practitioners who are political prostitutes. And as such, this war is going to continue. The problem isn't Jordan. Not to suggest that the Jordanian problem shouldn't be addressed. But the problem isn't Jordan. The problem is Ehud Barak. It's Ehud Olmer. It's Yair Lapid. It's Naftali Bennett. It is the Israeli, the high courts in Israel. The best friend that the Arabs have in Israel today aren't parliamentarians who sit in Jordan and pontificate the way they do. The best friends they have sit with Bagatz, sit with the Israeli High Court, the Israeli Supreme Court. They are the best friend that the Arabs of Israel and the Arabs outside of Israel have. And we need someone bold. And if there's one organization out there, one organization which stands up and says the right things all the time, it's the Zionist Organization of America. And it's not surprising that because the ZOA is the organization that says the right thing all the time, it's the organization that is so often vilified by other American liberal Jewish organizations. It's remarkable. When we spoke a week ago, we spoke about this letter that was circulated, signed by 330 rabbis indeed, rabbis in America, criticizing Israel's government and everything else, this loss of democracy. They're parroting the woke progressive voice in America. It's an assault on democracy and all this nonsense. Well, I'm told, I was looking at the J Street site, which I often do. I laugh, I cry. And I think that number is now 430 rabbis who've signed that. And as I said, I think in a previous broadcast, most of these rabbis are rabbis who certainly don't speak Hebrew. Many of them don't read Hebrew. There was a survey done decades ago, and the number has gone in the wrong direction since then, that said that this is decades ago, that 14% of Reform rabbis in America are atheists, declared atheists. Well, there's a wonderful spiritual guide. And today that number is significantly higher. The point that needs to be made is this. And I lecture every week. I lecture to an audience that has mostly Reform Jews. The Reform Jews aren't to be fully blamed for the positions that they've taken. Their leaders are. The Reform Jews really don't know the situation and trust someone who they think knows a little more than they do. And the only advantage, it was said by a rabbi before me, it's a wonderful comment, the only reason Reform rabbis in America have a pulpit is because they actually found a congregation of people who actually know less about Judaism than they do. Shocking. What we need to do is be bold. The ZOA is an organization that is bold. We got to stand up, identify the enemy, and do so unabashedly. Because one day Jewish history and also our Maker is going to judge us on what we did when that critical hour appeared. We need to stand and be firm.
Absolutely. Well put. 100%. There's no question about it. That's right. Listen, we're coming down to almost an hour. Let's go with some closing comments. This is a discussion that's going to go on for a long time. We've got a lot of issues ahead of us. Liz, if you could give a closing remark, and then we'll go to Mayor, and then I'll close it up.
Yeah, I wanted to make a few. Mayor said first, thank you very much for all. Yeah, you can't forget what the betrayal, his betrayal on Lebanon Marine border deal, which Hezbollah, with billions of dollars, Israeli maritime rights, maritime land, the maritime, and he no right to do that from as an interim prime minister. It will be a disaster that Israel will have to deal with, and will really enrich, has been just a disaster. And, and he has 430 rabbis that Meyer mentions, of them, which we're going to, over 200 of those rabbis were J. On J Street has something called councils. So it's basically a J Street letter, was written by of the J Street Council. So this is in almost every time by so-called U.S. rabbis who had organization they're with, or similar organizations. The Iran deal. There was an Iran deal, the same number, 300 something rabbis. When we analyzed who are these rabbis, and J Street, an anti-Israel organization, which has gone to the UN and promoted anti-Israel, has been hostile to, promotes the election of anti-Israel Congress people. This is really what we're dealing with, and it's themselves U.S. rabbis without identifying. So J Street, so-called rabbis. One of those rabbis, by the way, was Sharon Klum, who was the rabbi of gay and lesbian synagogue and pro-Israel gay and lesbian synagogue, because they couldn't stand how she was reading saying Kaddish for members, stunts like that. I mean, this shows who are ganging up on his comment that I wanted to make was department and what Israel can do in terms of the U.S. State Department actually came out at the visit, the Ben Gvir, when Ben Gvir did not, even Mr. Ben, and the January 3rd, the State Department's focus repeatedly insisted, quote, lateral actions that undercut they are unacceptable. This visit has dimensions and to provoke violence. Violence come from the people who are making, as we know, there is absolutely no relation of any kind of status quo, but from Israel, and any Jew is within their rights to. And the problem, Jordan, the Palestinian Authority, countries that are threatening Israel, a walk on the synagogue, a walk on by a Jew, a provocation. They're on Aqsa, they are storming Al-Aqsa. There's what has been used. These falsehoods about simply wanting to prey on their holy from time immemorial to foment violence, to massacre was one of the incidents by false claims that Jews, which was spread by Hashim, the Mufti of Jerusalem, a collaborator with Hitler, and hundreds of Jews were killed in the 30s and in the 1929 due to false statements about Jews. And this happened again repeatedly in 2000. What was it? I guess 2000 or 2001, 2000, when Sharon walked on the Temple Mount. That walk on the Temple Mount pre-approved by. They said that no problems would erupt as an excuse for Fada, which was actually, members of later admitted that the second lie, the walk was in September, the killings in the second Intifada, Sharon's walk, another excuse to kill Jews. Palestinian Authority has been using this, and he started the wave of terror 5, and he's repeatedly broadcasting in television and in social media statements that the Jews and they have to protect Al-Aqsa and spill blood. The Jews and Christians filthy feet from Al-Aqsa, and this was again a major wave of terror starting in 2000. So the provocations are coming. The Palestinian Authority, Hamas, and not from Israel, and not from Jews in their rights to this holiest site. Thank you very much, and thank.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We have to continuously speak the truth. There are Jewish ideals, and we have to hold firm to those ideals and make them into goals, Jewish goals. Speak the truth. Never back down from speaking the truth. In the end, we have no choice but really to speak the truth. And please share this on your various social media platforms. We'll reach a lot more people. I got a message from some people that there was some audio issues with this particular show. We'll work on those definitely. But one thing that I can say, we're very happy that this is now being broadcast live as well on Twitter. So now we could reach a lot more people, and we certainly have announcements to make and information to share. And by having that platform on Twitter, that's a huge bracha, a huge blessing for the Never Again live show. So we'll certainly reach a lot more people. We'll certainly alert our Jewish communities to whatever threats that are coming against the Jewish people as well. We'll take advantage of every single platform that we have, that we could speak the truth, speak the Jewish ideals, to make Jews stronger and prouder and safer. And again, we call on the government of Israel to not let it be ignored. The measures that Jordon has taken publicly, this incitement, this is anti-Semitic incitement. There's anti-Semitism running rampant throughout the world, especially in campuses, and Jewish communities are being targeted, and Jews are being hit by Islamic BDS organizations. Jordon only throws more logs on the fire. Don't take a backseat. Don't ignore the problem. We have to do what we have to do and fight back. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Unfortunately, Barry Shaw was with us. He'll certainly be with us on future shows. But again, thank you very much, and please support us. Go on our website, israelnow.ca. Send us an email. Say you want to get involved, you want to volunteer. That would be appreciated. You can help us with research. If you want to help us with the podcast, that's appreciated as well. And if you just want to make a donation, that would be certainly appreciated. Again, our website, israelnow.ca. We're there. We're speaking the truth. We're getting it done. Thank you very much. Shalom. Shalom.
Good.
נפש יהודי